Tonight, Hamas now saying it and its affiliates are holding as many as 250 hostages. U.S. officials saying some are Americans. They don't even know the exact number or their conditions. Scripps News talking with families of some of those hostages, including an 18-year-old American from Illinois. Our international correspondent Jason Bellini reports.
Among the many cruelties suffered by Israelis is that the families of these hostages have to endure the horror of watching again and again Hamas videos for signs of their loved ones.
So this is a picture about a week before she was kidnapped.
That's one of the last photos Saray Cohn had of her 18-year-old niece, Natalie Ranan. The last communication came by text from a safe room in a kibbutz called Nahal Oz.
She said that they're hearing shooting out of their apartment, that they're okay and they love us. And that was the last message I heard from them.
Natalie is 18 years old. She's from Illinois, visiting family in Israel with her mother. When the texts stopped coming, Cohn was anxious but hopeful.
At first, I thought maybe she ran out of battery, or maybe there was a break and they decided to rest a little bit. But after 2 hours, I felt something was wrong.
Hope turned to terror when the family finally made it to the apartment. Natalie and her mother, Judith, were gone.
The doors were thrown out, the windows were broken, the personal belongings were still on the floor, but they were nowhere to be found.
They weren't there.
They weren't there.
In a search for proof of life, she, like most families, watches every Hamas video of the massacres.
Horrible videos of things being done to people captured there. We went through all of them in order to see if we can recognize either one of them, but we did not find anything yet.
Nothing in any of those videos?
No. We did see a video of Hamas terrorists bragging and laughing that they took young women.
How do you think she's handling this?
I think she's terrified, really terrified. It's horrible to think what she's going through.
I am an American, and I've been living in Israel for the last 8 years.
Abby On is searching for 5 members of her family missing from kibbutz near Oz.
They understood Hamas was there. They could hear the Arabic. They could hear gunfire. They could hear people in houses next to them being killed.
In their text messages, were they just terrified?
They were afraid for their lives. They were sending messages saying goodbye, that they loved each other, and that this was, for them, a Holocaust.
Like Saray Cohn, Abby On's family turned to the Hamas videos and found her 12-year-old cousin, Sahar.
Sahar is 12, and much like my own son, he loves Legos and riding bikes and going to amusement parks.
Also missing, 13-year-old Noya, who's autistic.
She is on the spectrum with autism, and she has very special needs. Her most defining love is Harry Potter.
How do you think she's handling this?
Poorly. We know when Hamas was there that she doesn't understand what was happening. She is sensitive to light and noise and touch. So I imagine that this is a nightmare.
It's a calamity that spans generations. Gone, too, is On's Israeli-American grandmother, Carmela, a matriarch of this peace-loving kibbutz whose chances of survival are greatly diminished by a heart condition.
She's dire. She takes daily medicine. She's turning 80 this week. This is a woman who, without her medicine, will be in dire medical need.
So for Carmela, the urgency is extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Their pain is Israel's pain, and until the families come home, there will be no solace.
Every one of the people in this country right now is in trauma, a trauma that will last us for generations in the same way that the Holocaust is still with us today. Both women's families were on a Zoom call with President Biden with relatives of the hostages, and both of them believe their loved ones are alive. Jason Bellini, Scripps News, Tel Aviv.
Jason, thank you very much. One of those hostages being held by Hamas is being seen and heard for the first time since she was abducted. The video released by the terrorists. She's 21 years old. She was attending that music festival a little more than a week ago. That's when Hamas terrorists stormed the concert, killing and kidnapping others. The woman identifies herself as Mia Shim. She is seen being treated for what appears to be a broken arm and says she underwent 3 hours of surgery. She says she's okay now and is begging to be released. This is the video that was released by Hamas. It is unclear whether she was forced to make the statements. The Israel Defense Force is saying this is an attempt by Hamas to paint itself as humane. Instead, they say it is a murderous terror group. Hamas now says they are holding as many as 250 hostages. President Biden is said to be planning a trip to Israel. This is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrives back there after a visit to nearby Egypt. Blinken has been traveling across the Middle East since last week. The Biden administration working hard to prevent the conflict from spreading. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull joins us now. And Haley, what is the latest tonight from the White House?
Good evening, Del. President Biden remaining here at the White House, canceling a trip to Colorado that was scheduled to focus on his domestic agenda, instead focusing on the situation in the Middle East as intense diplomatic efforts continue from the White House down. Now, Biden received briefings from his national security team throughout the day and spoke with Egypt's president, Germany's chancellor, and Iraq's prime minister. It comes amid speculation that he is weighing a trip to Israel, something the White House has not confirmed or offered any details on future travel. If that came to fruition, it would be seen as a strong show of support for Israel. But as one expert on Middle Eastern affairs points out to us, it could also be met by tension with others in the region. Now, the administration's messages to date have been in support of Israel's defense, keeping the conflict from widening, and increasingly further pushing on the humanitarian front as more dire warnings about the civilian suffering in Gaza continue to mount, including the ability of people to leave and aid to get in. Now, the U.S.'s top diplomat, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, returned to Israel after a series of stops across the Middle East. He in part underscored Israel's right to defend itself from Hamas and the U.S. coordination on humanitarian aid, an issue the president has now appointed a special envoy on. Now, a State Department spokesperson says while there and meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the rocket sirens went off and the leaders took shelter before continuing their discussion. Notably, over the weekend, Biden said he thought Israeli occupation of Gaza would be a, quote, big mistake, Del.
Haley, I don't know if you know what is going on behind you. That is Lafayette Park for our audience that's not familiar with Washington, D.C. Do we know if it is a rally involving this? And also, we're learning as you were talking that the IDF is now saying, the Israeli Defense Force is saying, they have attacked Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Also, do we know anything tonight about the support from Congress?
Yeah, so let's hit this first. What's going on outside the White House? There have been demonstrations going on for hours, calling for a ceasefire, appearing to push the White House to further press on that effort. When it comes to the congressional aid, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying that the White House is preparing supplemental funding requests for both Ukraine and Israel and could support both. Leaders in the Senate offering strong messages of support for Israel, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, back from leading a bipartisan delegation to Israel, who says the Senate wants to move quickly. Listen.
That means military assistance, intelligence assistance, diplomatic assistance, and humanitarian assistance to care for innocent civilians. We want to move this package quickly. The Senate must go first. I know that the House is in disarray, but we cannot wait for them. The needs are too great. And if we pass a strong package with strong bipartisan support, it will importune the House somehow or other to act, despite the morass they are in.
The surest way to stop violence against Israelis and oppression of Palestinians is to wipe terrorists like Hamas from the face of the earth.
And when it comes to those deterrence efforts, Del, to keep this conflict from widening, the U.S. directing a second carrier strike group to the region in that effort. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu saying today to Iran and Hezbollah, quote, don't test us in the north. Del.
Haley Bull for us at the White House. Haley, thank you very much. Thanks for the update, by the way, on Lafayette Square. Sometimes the audience and people there don't know whether or not that sound bleeds through. This time it did.